Get nervous when you're paging through, what was it, a $3 million comic book, Barry?
The answer to your question is
Hello, everyone. I am so pleased to be joined by Barry Sandoval. He's vice president at Heritage Auctions and he works in comic books. Barry has many claims to fame, but one of them is he auctioned off a super high grade copy of Amazing Fantasy 15. In fact, tied for the highest grade in the world at a 9.6. And that copy sold for $3.6 million, a world record at the time. So in this interview, we're going to get to know Barry a little bit better. We're going to get to know his business side of Barry as well as collector side of Barry too. Barry, so glad that you're here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go right back to Amazing Fantasy 15. How'd you get the job of auctioning that epic book? And at the time, did you think it would break the world record?
Yeah, at that time I was calling most of our major auctions. The answer on whether I expected it or not, you can see the auction call on YouTube. And as I read out the number, my voice is cracking a bit. I think that's an indication that I wasn't expecting to get quite to those numbers. The estimate was $2 million plus, but we didn't know how much plus was. Pleased to have part of that little sliver of comic book history.
Obviously, you work with comics at a high level and have been doing so for a number of years. What are the ingredients to your personal success, Barry?
I've always thought of what we do at Heritage as a team effort. For my part, I would just say I think the fact that I'm also a collector helps, because that's not only passion for the material, but also I would like to think that I'd treat consigners the way I would want my own consignment to be handled, and the same thing for bidders.
How did your sort of knowledge and skills come about?
Definitely a lot has been added in the 20 years at Heritage from when I walked through the door. As a young kid growing up in Boulder, Colorado, we had Mile High Comics right there. That was one of my great experiences at Heritage. Chuck Rosansky of Mile High, who I remember seeing through a child's eyes, getting to do some business transactions with him as a grown-up was a pretty big thrill. So while we didn't have any major or serious comic book convention in the Denver Boulder area back then, we did have one of the great shops. So that was great as far as having a comic book resource. But really, as far as Golden Age, I really have to give credit to my childhood friend, Tim Collins, who is a comic dealer even today. You'll find his ad in every Overstreet under RTS Unlimited. Even back when we were teenagers, he was ambitious as a collector and wanted to get into Golden Age. And I'm pretty sure the first Golden Age comic I ever saw was some Alex Schomburg Timely cover sitting around his house with characters going in 15 different directions. The poison gas labeled poison gas, and all the chaos there. In a lot of ways, I followed his lead, and I know a lot of Golden Age comics I heard of for the first time just looking through his mail order catalogs.
And I'd like to dive into a little bit of collector Barry. And so I imagine, especially in your role at Heritage, that there's been times when you thought, I can't believe I'm holding this book in my hand. So what are the top 2 or 3 books that when you held them in your hand, you're like, oh my gosh, this is an unbelievable experience?
One that comes to mind, and it ties in with the Edgar Church Mile High collection, is we had the Mile High run of Jumbo Comics number 1 through 8, which we sold as one lot. Those are oversized comics. So as I'm sure you know, Keston, if you find any of those in even a very good condition, you're doing well, and a very fine is almost unheard of. I think maybe we graded those near mint minus in the auction. Just their size precludes many nicer copies from having survived, because they just take damage so easily. With the passage of time, the more comics I see, the more I realize just how special that was.
Is there any other book that you'd like to mention?
Another, I guess more obvious one would be the San Francisco pedigree copy of Captain America Comics number 1. We've been fortunate enough to have several $1 million comics over the years, but I believe that's the only one that that I ever paged through and got to grade while it was still in a bag and board.
Do you get nervous when you're paging through what was it, a $3 million comic book, Barry, or 2 million, something like that?
It was initially, and when we initially auctioned it, it was just short of 1 million, and then a few years later, the buyer from the first time reconsigned it, and then it was over 3 million the second time around. The answer to your question is yes, but we kind of try to maintain the same principles for handling books all the way up and down the scale. So if you have good habits handling $10 books, then you should carry those over all the way up the scale.
Barry, are you also one of those sniffers that you like to get down there and sniff the book and see what it smells like?
I think yes, that's part of evaluating the freshness of the comic. I've personally always thought the grading services don't take off enough for foxing. When there's any kind of mold, I don't want it near me, and I think a fair amount of collectors see the same way, and that's something that should be deducted. Speaking of the page quality, one other memorable thing was getting to handle some of the Vancouver pedigree comics, because I found those had the nicest page quality of any of the pedigrees, even better than the Mile Highs. The Vancouver pedigree books are not big key titles for the most part. They're mostly funny animal type books, but just that state of preservation was really great to see.
Many viewers of this channel have their own comic book super niche, right? Something really specific. And I know you do as well. So can you tell me what your super niche is?
Well, one thing I'm very much partial to is the so-called picture frame Marvels. The Marvels from November 1971 through January 1973 that have a colored border on the cover. The most expensive one for sure right now is Marvel Spotlight #5 with the first Ghost Rider appearance. Gil Kane didn't draw every one. It only seems like he did, but the cover invariably has the hero in some super dramatic situation where you can't imagine some kid wouldn't shell out his 20 cents to find out how that turned out.
If somebody's trying to collect them, like, what are they looking for? Are there certain sort of aesthetics that people like in collecting those types of books?
First of all, the nice thing is none of them are rare. They were mainstream Marvel titles for the most part. There's no picture frame cover where you couldn't find 4 or 5 or even 20 copies on eBay right now. I know some people who collect them who just chase the highest grade, as in the highest CGC grade. To me, that picture frame design doesn't look good when it's a little bit skewed, and unfortunately, most of them are a little bit skewed. Personally, I would rather have the perfectly centered near mint minus than the skewed near mint plus. Others don't care about that as much. That's the fun thing about your own collection is that you make all the rules yourself. It's all about what you're looking for and not what anybody else wants.
What suggestions do you have for viewers trying to build a collection they love?
What I always hate to hear is sometimes we'll hear from somebody about something that they maybe won in one of our auctions half a year ago or a year ago. Every 6 months, I open all the packages and check everything off my list. What I always think is if your collecting has become just about checking something off a list, and you can wait 6 months, what would be something where you couldn't wait for the package to be in the mail and you would just tear it open the second you got it and just admire it, how great it is? And whatever that is, you should be collecting that thing. Like as a kid, when you sent off for something, a mail order, right? It said, you 6 weeks for delivery, and then you race to the mailbox every single day. Those are the things that you should be collecting.
I am in the middle of creating a video, Barry, actually about how to put together a collection that you love. And it was inspired by one of my viewers. In essence, there's all these videos about, how do you squeeze every last penny out of your comic book collection? You press it, you're trying to time the market. And I'm thinking, it sounds like comic books are much more like a stock or, real estate than comic books. And of course, there's money involved. I mean, you're working at an auction house. But to me, it's like the underlying piece of it is, are you getting something that brings you a lot of joy? And if you are, you've probably done something right. If you're not, it's not a bad thing, I guess. I mean, you can choose to collect how you want or invest how you want. But for me, comic books are a very like special thing to me. And yeah, I don't want my comic books to like crater in value and be great that, when I do part with some books that I could potentially make some money, but that's not the thing that drives me.
Yeah, I feel the same way. If the world as a whole decided tomorrow that they didn't want to pay anything for comic books, I might be a little sad. But everything I have because I like it, and I wouldn't like it any less if it didn't have any resale value. I personally think for most people, collecting is more satisfying if you have a goal or a theme of some sort. And having worked at Heritage for 20 years now, that's one thing we've gone through a few times is we've had collectors who are new to the hobby who will, they can afford to buy a bunch of good stuff, but then at some point the realization sets in. I have all these different cool things, but no one thing that has anything to do with anything else. And typically there comes a point where those people will say, okay, from this point onward, I'm going to chase this goal, or maybe it's these 5 goals. I think most people have more satisfaction if they have certain themes like that rather than just picking up random things.
Barry, is there any last thing you'd like to leave the audience with?
Anybody out there who's not a Heritage Auctions customer, if you're not checking our auctions every week, you're missing 1,300 lots every single week with no minimum bids or reserves. So definitely go to ha.com and check those out.
By the way, this is not a sponsored video by Heritage, but I want to say that on my own, I am constantly going through the Heritage auctions because they give you all the past prices of any book they've ever sold, including pictures as well. And so I learned a whole lot through the hobby, just going through the pictures and the descriptions. Well, Barry, it has been a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for doing the interview.
Thank you, Keston. Happy holidays to you as well.
And for all of you out there, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing, and I'll hope to see you around real soon.